Okay, we're going to get going again because we have more interesting, exciting things to talk about. We're going to do a panel discussion now on the grid of the future, talk about things about who will generate and distribute electricity in the grid of the future, how's the role of the utility evolving, should build on some of the data that I shared with you this morning. We'll talk about disruptive technologies and business models. And to moderate the panel, I'd like to introduce Sila. I'm not going to murder her beautiful Turkish last name, and she can pronounce it correctly. I tried a couple times, and it wasn't happening. Sila is a former C3E award winner. So you can see how the cycle is working, and it's going to be great. And before joining the Stanford University part-time, Sila has built the Grid Integration Systems and Mobility Group at the SLAC National Accelerator Lab. And she spent more than 10 years at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab and was the deputy of the Demand Response Research Center. She's currently leading a team developing visualization and analytics for distributed energy resources. Visualization and analytics, right up my alley. It's going to be great. And her research interests include utilizing load flexibility and data analytics for distribution grid planning and operations. We've assembled a great panel that she's going to moderate. Over to you, Sila.
Thank you so much, Carol. All right. Good morning, everyone. We're going to do this just like we did yesterday, basically. I'm going to give a brief overview of the topic, and then I've asked each of our panelists to give a 10-minute presentation about their thoughts, and I asked them to really focus on challenges and opportunities as they see for grid of the future. Then we're going to have a conversation, and you'll have a chance to ask your questions as well. So with that, let me just start my sort of overview. I want to talk a little bit about trends that are happening today and a little bit about the way we see the grid of the future, and then invite our panelists. Currently, there's a lot of change happening, and it started maybe a decade ago with the clean energy adoption, renewable portfolio standards at the state level. There are really exciting things happening at the state level. I am from California, so a lot of great mandates and goals are set forth and very aggressive. Here in Massachusetts, there are equally aggressive and exciting goals that are taking place. But while this is all happening on the state regulatory side with governors' goals and mandates, there's also a lot of technological advances happening. I'm really excited that the Sunshot Initiative reached its 6 cents per kWh kilowatt hour goal 3 years earlier than expected at the utility scale solar. There's a lot of advancements in power electronics, a lot of advancements in control theory and communications. I think we all have communication devices with us today. There's also a lot of availability of cloud computing today that has gotten significantly cheaper, and it's at our fingertips. And with that came a lot of advances in data science and its application in the electricity grid planning and operations. And also recently, there's been a lot of investments or funds that have opened up for clean energy technologies, and recent acquisitions over the last year especially has been really, really exciting to me. And finally, one of the key trends that we're seeing is the increasing number of community choice aggregations where the procurement of power has been changing and delivery of service to the customers have been changing a little bit too. All this takes me to our vision for the grid of the future, and our vision is that it's going to be sustainable, autonomous, and allow for rapid innovation adoption. And let me unpack that a little bit. It will be sustainable. You have seen Carol's slide about all the requirements that we put on the grid. It has to be affordable, accessible, secure, reliable, safe, resilient, flexible. But when we look at these requirements, not all of them are well quantified. So if we want to realize the grid of the future with all these requirements, we have to quantify these and make sure that we can benchmark the grid today and move it forward in terms of our progress. In terms of autonomous, I think autonomous doesn't mean that it's just automated. It means that the grid will learn and it will figure out how to solve problems. And that points to us to two different trends today, machine learning and artificial intelligence. I feel like those are going to be major parts of the electricity grid planning and operations in the future. And with that comes a lot of attention to cybersecurity, of course. So we will have to think about how to bring those together on the technology side. And finally, rapid innovation adoption, and I'm really excited about talking with the panelists today on this topic as well. Yesterday, I think Francis said that we can't continue to have the same regulatory cycles. The regulatory cycles have to match some of the technology cycles, in a sense, while the decisions are being made. So she suggested 6 months, and I think that's a great start, but I think we can do better in the future. So with that, let me introduce my first speaker, Jaquelin Cochran. She's the manager of the Markets and Policy Group at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. Dr. Cochran analyzes policies and market design that create an enabling framework for emerging energy technologies with a focus on best practices for grid integration of renewable electricity. She recently completed a grid integration study of India, and I'm really curious about reading that one, Jaquelin. Prior to NREL, Dr. Cochran was an assistant professor of natural resource management with Kimep University in Almaty, Kazakhstan. She's also served as a Peace Corps volunteer for 2 years with the Polish Foundation for Energy Efficiency in Krakow. She holds a PhD and an MA from Energy and Resources Group from UC Berkeley.
Thank you, and thanks to the C3E organizers for inviting me to this event. This is my first time here, and it is really wonderful hearing all these experiences about women being in clean energy, and also women talking about clean energy in a way that just sounds so normal. So, love it. I have, as Sila noted, I've been really neck deep in India's power system for the last few years, so it's nice to step back and think about big trends in the grid of the future. And then I'm going to talk, there's so many different trends, but I'm going to talk about 4 that relate to my research at least. And just to make sure we're all on the same page, the grid operations is basically a matter of balance of supply and balancing supply and demand. And the key point I want to make here is that there are many sources of both supply and demand, and that both types are variable. And the power system is designed to handle this kind of variability. I work on systems that are looking ahead to a lot of renewable energy, particularly wind and solar. And so here the concern is, well, when we're adding wind and solar, we're adding a lot of variability to the supply side of the equation. And so how do we manage this? And so here, just this chart, we're looking at about 6 days. The yellow represents the demand for electricity, the load. And you can see it's a pretty standard up and down, pretty smooth. And the green at the bottom represents the available generation from wind and solar, the variable renewable energy. When you subtract the green from the yellow, we get the orange, and that's what we call the net load. That's the load that must be met by the rest of the power system. And what we are noting here is that you can see that the rest of the power system, the coal, the natural gas, everything else on the system needs to turn down lower. They experience higher ramp rates, they cycle more, and this creates a host of questions and concerns about how do you operate this kind of situation and how do you pay for it. So that brings me to the first trend, which is that many power systems have the physical flexibility that we need to handle this kind of balancing, but accessing this flexibility is a key challenge to renewable energy grid integration. So we can think about flexibility from 2 perspectives. The physical is all the things that generate, transmit, store electrons. This is the easy part of the equation. Adding a natural gas plant to get more flexibility is relatively simple. But the hard part is the institutional access. This is the set of tools, whether it's market rules, whether it's the regulations, whether it's just the decision-making processes within the system operator. These are the tools of how you actually access that flexibility. And this is harder because here you're looking at not what can we add, but how do we take the assets that we have and manage these more efficiently, provide the right incentives so that that flexibility that we want is there. You know, how do we collaborate with our neighbors? If there's flexibility there, what are the market rules that need to be in place? What do we do with day-ahead renewable energy forecasting? So this is the harder part of the equation. And this is where we spend a lot of our time on grid integration, is that institutional filter. So that also leads to the second trend, which is the importance of market signals. And market signals can help bring this flexibility of the power system, but we really want to think of it very broadly, that we can use market signals to access flexibility from residential space, commercial, industrial, transportation. Really, flexibility can be many places, and getting the right market signals in place is difficult, but we want to be thinking about this from long-term investment perspectives as well as short-term operational perspectives. So long-term, meaning we're thinking about what are the signals that need to be in place to get the capacity built, or the types of flexibility, you know, maybe it's in the home, that we need, and then also keep from retiring the flexibility that we already have on the system that we want. And then also from short-term perspectives, let's say you're a coal plant and you have the potential to turn down lower during the day when your solar generation is higher. What is the flexibility, what are the regulations or market signals needed to make sure that that coal plant operator wants to turn down? The third trend is that I see in a lot of power systems, more so US and Europe than in the developing countries where I do a lot of my work, but it is to treat renewable energy like a conventional power plant and removing priority dispatch. So priority dispatch is still really common in a lot of countries because it's a tool to make sure the investors have confidence that the renewable energy that they're paying for and is helping generate is actually used on the grid. So it's been really useful, especially early stages of renewable energy development. As we're looking long-term, though, as renewable energy gets to be a larger percentage, the penetration levels get higher, the trend is to expect that we want the renewable energy plants to be a good grid citizen like the rest of the fleet. So that means that the renewable energy is visible, it's schedulable, dispatchable, curtailable, and able to provide ancillary services. And the technologies have come a long way in the ability for wind and solar generators to provide frequency and voltage support. And so a lot of places are saying, hey, it's time to take the kid gloves off. Renewable energy is going to be a major component on this. Let's think of other ways to make sure we can have the investor confidence. And a lot of my work is in India. We can't just remove priority dispatch and expect this to all work out well. There are places around the world where dispatch is not based on merit order. It's based on maybe the feed-in tariffs or other things that take into account fixed cost. So the full spectrum of the right environment needs to be in place for these kinds of changes to happen. And then the final trend I'm going to speak about is planning. And so planning for these high renewable energy power systems. This kind of planning requires much higher quality temporal and spatial data to be able to characterize the diverse generation resources. So the wind and solar is time and place specific. And as we're thinking about the grid, before we were using the baseload paradigm, and that was talked about a bit this morning. When we think about baseload, we think about, well, what is the least cost in terms of operating costs? What's the least cost source of generation that we want to make sure we're using as much as possible? In the past, that was coal and nuclear. When we're looking in hydro, and then when we're looking ahead to higher renewable futures, that least cost energy source is also going to include wind and solar. Wind and solar is not available at all times, but we still want to be able to use it when it's available because it's least cost. So that complicates the planning in terms of we can't just assume, take one standard day in the planning cycle and think about what are the resources that we need there. Here we're looking at year or a couple years worth of data to look at, well, when do we need the hydro? What is the ramping capacity? What sort of ramp rates do we need on the rest of the system? And then tie it back into the earlier comments I made about, how does this then tie into the right market signals? So planning has become much more data intensive and exciting in that way too. And then I want to end with a plug of our website. I do a lot of work with U.S. Agency for International Development, and we created a website called greeningthegrid.org, and we have a host of materials written for a variety of audiences, but on the topic of grid integration, and then that's my email, so please use all this as resources. Thank you.
Do you want to go to the podium? All right. I'd like to introduce you to Sherina Edwards. Commissioner Sherina Maye Edwards was appointed by Governor Pat Quinn on February 25th, 2013, to a 5-year term in the Illinois Commerce Commission. This appointment was historical as she was the youngest commissioner ever appointed in the state of Illinois. Prior to her appointment, Commissioner Edwards practiced as an attorney where she focused on all aspects of consumer finance litigation. Since her appointment to the ICC, she has taken an interest in electric reliability, water, natural gas, and critical infrastructure issues. Edwards has also been a champion for diversity and inclusion, and in September 2014, founded the Women's Energy Summit as an annual forum for select women across the nation to discuss pertinent issues in energy industry, highlight accomplishments and uplift rising stars and break down barriers. In 2015, she co-founded the Chicago chapter of the Women's Energy Network, an organization which attracts, educates, and develops professional women across the energy value chain. Thank you, Sherina.
Thank you, Sila. Good morning. It's wonderful to be here. I haven't been to Boston in quite a while, and I think we're not in Boston, right? People say this is a very distinct difference. So anyway, it's nice to be here wherever I am. So, good morning. The last couple of years, it's so funny, when I started on the commission in late 2013, everything was, presentations, and there were lots of slides. And I've found that over the last 2 years, I keep getting these messages from coordinators of conferences and moderators saying, okay, we're going to go slide free, we're going to go slide free. So I'm so used to being slide free, I am slide free today. So hopefully you can follow along with me, happy to answer any questions. I also feel like the bulk of the great discussion generally is during the Q&A. So I'm going to try to keep my comments limited so that we can get to some really good, juicy questions that you might have. But I am always excited to speak about, I apologize. I wanted to thank the coordinators of this fantastic conference. So often I am out on the road away from home and speaking to rooms full of people who look nothing like me. And it is so nice to see not just such a fantastic group of women, but such a diverse group of women. So give yourselves a round of applause. And I'm honored to be on this panel. So often you see panels with all regulators. They want the regulator perspective. You see panels with all, like, the C-suite perspective. But I think that does a disservice in a sense, because I think the integration of the conversation is most important. So I love that there are so many different perspectives here, and hopefully you'll get a lot out of it, as I'm sure I will, as well as a panelist. But excited to talk about the grid of the future. That has really been, over the last 2.5 years, really, the focus of a lot of what we are doing. And in Illinois, we've really long been a trailblazer. I think that sometimes, you're so focused on hearing what's going on in New York, what's going on in California. But Illinois, I believe, deservedly so, has really soared to the top of that list of trailblazers when it comes to grid modernization, utility of the future, and how we're going to look forward over the next, 10, 20, 50 years even. So let's talk about the concept of the grid of the future. Really, it began by the fact that you have this evolution of the consumer. So when I think of the grid of the future, I kind of think of a triangle. And I think of in the middle of that triangle being the consumer, because they are the epicenter of what the utility and the grid of the future is all about. because consumers are no longer passive. You know, at one point in time, the average consumer was just getting a bill and paying it, getting a bill and paying it. Then we had, you know, great waves in technology, and then consumers signed up for bill pay, and so they were getting a bill and paying it without paying it themselves. They didn't have to look at anything, they didn't have to see anything, it was just kind of like out of sight, out of mind, and you never cared about your electricity or your gas until what? You didn't have it. So when there was a lights out moment, that's when you remembered, oh my God, something is wrong, right? But other than that, the whole goal in the process was that you noticed nothing about your electricity or your gas. So now you have this very evolving consumer who's gone from really being the consumer to a prosumer, who is very active and is very concerned about the bills, and not just about what they're paying, but about what they're getting for what they're paying. Consumers now love to compare themselves to their neighbors and to say, what is their usage and how does mine compare to that? And I am, you know, a woman who's married with 5 kids, and so is my neighbor, and why is theirs so much lower than mine? You know, so people are very interested, and even to kind of steer a little bit off track, but not really, because I think the nexus is so important. Even when it comes to water, people are now much more concerned about conservation efforts and efficiency, and that goes across the board. So anyway, now you have this evolving consumer who is very interested, the average consumer is very interested about the grid, so to speak, and about their utility usage. And everybody needed to change. All of the key stakeholders needed to change. And that's why I look at it as a triangle with the consumer in the middle, because you have, obviously you have the industry, which is really, really, really important. And they have to make the change because the consumers are changing. When your customer changes, you need to change as well, unless you're Kodak, of course, and we saw what happened with them. And then you have the consumer advocate, and they're fighting for the consumer, and they're saying, we've noticed these trends and changes, and we need to make sure that all of the other key stakeholders acknowledge it and also address it, but at the right price, at the right cost. And then, of course, you have the regulatory bodies, and we are there to ensure that the right legislation is enacted and the right regulations are put in place to address these changing needs. So it really is, I think, a dynamic package, and you can't have a triangle, right? It's A squared plus B squared equals C squared. You can't have 2 corners of the triangle without the other one and call it a triangle. So you need to have the full package and all of those relevant key stakeholders. So once we noticed that this was happening, that really is what we said, okay, we need to start addressing this because the current grid is not set up in a way that's going to address this evolving consumer. So in Illinois, again, I think over the last couple of decades, we've had sweeping legislation that has addressed not necessarily this changing consumer of today, but over time, right? So it goes back to really 1997 was our first major legislation where we had the Consumer Choice Act, and that really restructured the state of Illinois, and we now are a state with over 90 alternative suppliers, and our consumers do have a choice. They do have a choice in where they can, which supplier they're allowed, they're able to use. And just having that choice, it keeps that competition there, and it keeps people on their toes, and it makes people think, okay, look, I need to perform, and I need to perform well, because guess what? I am no longer the only utility or the only energy services provider that the consumer must use. So that was 1997. Then moved forward just about 15 years, and there was the Energy Infrastructure Modernization Act, which was enacted in 2011. And that was significant in the state of Illinois and really a game changer in the name of energy, because you started to see shadows of, we call it EMA, because God forbid you have yet another acronym in this industry. We needed one desperately in Illinois. So after EMA, we saw models of that throughout the country. And really what it did is it did multiple things, but the highlights were it allowed our 2 major utilities, Commonwealth Edison, that services the northern half of the state of Illinois, and Ameren, that services the southern half of the state of Illinois, $2.6 billion in infrastructure investments and upgrades to modernize the grid. And what that modernization package included was, more than anything, the deployment of the smart meters. And they set out a 10-year plan. So now, think about this. This was in 2011. By 2021, they were supposed to complete a full deployment in the state of Illinois of smart meters. Well, by the end of 2018, 100% of our customers in the state of Illinois will have smart meters, and that was done. It'll be 4 years earlier than it was anticipated in that legislation, because we saw just how crucial it was, and we needed to. And then it's like, as you provide more and more services for the consumers, they're like soaking it up and they're utilizing it more. And we're thinking, okay, we don't have time. We can't do this over a 10-year period. We need to move it along, because it's not fair that, Joe Turner has her smart meter and this person over here will never get theirs for 8 years. So we had an accelerated plan put in place that the commission oversaw, and that was really significant. So yes, that was a lot of money, but it brought a lot of jobs to the state of Illinois, and it saw a lot of change. And again, we served as a model for multiple states across the nation in that infrastructure modernization plan. That was in 2011. Fast forward to last December of 2016, and this is the one that I think everybody's dying to talk about, because is a bit controversial. The Future Energy Jobs Act. Again, we were dying for another acronym, so we call it FEJA. And what FEJA did was essentially assisted our major generator in the state of Illinois, Exelon, who had 7 nuclear plants in the state, 3 of which were struggling. Over a period of, I want to get this right, over a period of 5 years, they had lost over $800,000 in investments, because of the fact that really we know, because of consistent or stagnant demand for power, because of the fact that now everybody's kind of moving away from nuclear, moving towards renewable energy, there was just really no investments or no money to be made on those plants. They threatened to close. Illinois, as you may know, has the most nuclear in the United States. We have about 12,000 megawatts of nukes. That would have taken 3,000 out, which is significant. And we thought, okay, we can't have that. We need a fix. So what the FEJA legislation did was essentially it provides, it's a subsidization. I know we don't like that S word, but I don't think any of those mean people are here. So it's really a subsidization for those nuclear plants, and it keeps them open, it keeps them alive and well, but at the same time, it again provided a significant amount of jobs to the state of Illinois, to outside contractors, to minorities, to women, to disabled veterans, and at the same time, it allows a significant focus on our renewable energy portfolio in the state of Illinois. Again, a trailblazing move, and you may think I'm a little biased. Obviously, I'm a commissioner in Illinois, and I'm talking about us being a trailblazer, but these have been significant moves, and now you've seen it literally take place across the country. Because of FEJA, we established an initiative called NextGrid, which we launched on September 25th in Illinois. And what NextGrid is, it is our platform and our focal point on how we're going to essentially, okay, so we have this legislation, but what does it mean? What does it mean for the industry? What does it mean for the regulators? And what does it mean for the consumers? And really, it puts it all together. So NextGrid is an 18-month collaborative study that we will be overseeing, rolling out over a period of time. Again, it started in September. And we have work groups. We have 8 different work groups. There are different buckets. So cybersecurity is one of them. Resilience is another. And we have the key stakeholders from you would be so surprised. We have over 350 participant groups. So not participants, probably thousands of participants, but participant groups, over 350 of them that are participating in NextGrid. And it'll be a series of workshops, policy sessions, and ultimately this group will come back, and there's a facilitator who is the University of Illinois. The facilitator will come back at the end of the 18-month period, present to the commission, to the legislature, General Assembly, and to all of the key stakeholders and say, okay, based on this collaborative study, this is what we found that needs to happen. This is what we find that the commission needs to do. We need this regulatory action. This is what we find that industry needs to do. You all need to do these things. And I think that that is the key. You hear about Minnesota. They have a program that's called E21 that is their focal point on the utility of the future. Ohio has Power Forward, which is their focal point on the utility of the future. But the difference, and of course you've heard of New York Rev, I'm sure. But the difference is that our study is the only one that is a collaborative piece. It is bringing every single key stakeholder in. And again, remember what I said at the beginning. The whole point of this grid of the future is really, again, goes back to that triangle. You cannot have these conversations with missing links not in the room and people not at the table. It's almost like saying you've completed a puzzle with 21 pieces missing. So I find that Illinois, once again, is a game changer in this conversation. We've since seen, we have a lot of other states coming, a lot of other commissioners coming to Illinois to sit down with us. We had about probably 20 states represented at our Next Grid launch in September, as well as members of the FERC that came, really looking at, wow, what are we doing and it's working, and seeing kind of how. So this is these are my points on the grid of the future. Again, I think the juice is always in the conversation. I'm very much so looking to the dialogue between myself and my fellow panelists, and you all as well. So hopefully that was succinct enough for you all to follow along. But again, glad to be here. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce Paula Gold-Williams. She's the president and CEO of CPS Energy, one of the nation's largest municipally owned, vertically integrated utilities with annual revenues of $2.5 billion and total assets of over $10.5 billion. Paula leads its more than 3,000 team members with the vision she coined, People First, whereby CPS Energy is evolving its efforts to create and deliver value to its customers, employees, and community to a new age of energy solutions. In 2017, Paula was inducted into the San Antonio Women's Hall of Fame, was honored by the San Antonio Hispanic Chamber of Commerce as Corporate Executive of the Year Award, and was also named the Financial Executive of the Year by the Financial Executive Internationals Association.
Good morning. So I do have a few slides. I'm gonna jump around a little bit to try to give you some context. You heard a bit about CPS Energy. You know, this is a dynamic time, though. I'm excited. You often hear people of a certain age talk about there were times where there were no women conferences. That did not exist. And to be able to be at the apex of the industry today, with the amount of change that is happening, is an extremely exciting time. And for people who are newly entering the industry, it's a phenomenal place. There's a tremendous amount of history that we have, a tremendous amount of weight in the industry, but that ability to create something new, fresh, and evolving based upon existing value that we have is exactly very, very exciting to me. So you heard my background, just a little Cliff Notes version. So I'm an accountant running what I call an engineering analytics firm. And so this was never supposed to be. When they hired me, they did not assume that I would ascend to be CEO. But I really believe I had ascended because this is a time when it's not just about one solution. This is a time when you have to bring your technology, your engineering knowledge, your real understanding of business and transition. I don't know how many times we're going to mention economies of scale here. All the stuff that was created years ago matters right now, on top of policy, on top of partnership, on top of collaboration. So you got all of these hard quantitative things that you got to do with very, very interesting qualitative things. And nobody has figured it out fully. We think we see it, but we're all kind of guessing. That said, I'm going to tell you how CPS Energy is guessing, and I'm going to get to a couple of slides and talk about it. I will make these slides available. I'll send them. I won't go through a great deal of it, but I will say we are municipal, so we're a bit different than IOU. We do serve in a concentrated area. That was a wonderful presentation this morning. San Antonio is 1.4 million people, 7th largest city in the nation, and we do it all. We just celebrated our 75th year of being owned by the city of San Antonio, which presents lots of opportunities and lots of challenges. But the essence of it is that we've been in the business for 157 years. So when we started, there were only 8,000 people in the industry, and we were primarily a gas company. But we do it all. We have generation, transmission, distribution, and we serve the customers. So we have a bit of a personalization and comment because we actually serve in the community that we live. And so that is kind of the essence, and that was the source of People First. I'm going to talk about this, but I want to say I was on a plane about 2 months ago with a gentleman, and I don't mean to offend anybody. It was a fascinating conversation. He was in a subsidiary of Tesla, and he was talking about this wonderful, community that they were creating in a greenfield site. It's a modular, multi-dwelling unit facility where they're going to just drop the whole unit in, and it's going to be amazing. And they're going to have chutes for delivery from Amazon, and you'll be able to get big boxes and small boxes, and you're going to be able to see drones flying in, and everybody's going to be happy, and Starbucks is going to be inserted, and it's all going to be technology, and everybody's going to have apps, and it's all wonderful. And he goes, but our challengers, are people like you all, because you kind of behind the time, and he goes, now I get it, because most utilities have created volumetric pricing, and have created a cost recovery system that does not match where we're going in industry. And he goes, we've taken advantage of that on the renewable energy side, because that's why it's easier to tell people when they convert, it's so cheap, because it's not priced correctly. He goes, but that's one of your issues. But your problem is, you're big and slow, and you've been around a long time, and so I just don't know how you're going to do it. And I said, look, you're right. That is one of the biggest challenges we have, because we're behind the times to some degree. We've leaned into it, but we're behind the times. But I said, here's the interesting thing, and I think we see it when we look at Africa and India to some degree. When you're doing something kind of, nobody has power, and all of a sudden you can produce power in a distributed generation side, that is a quick delivery model, right? You could do it right away. And so greenfield sites, really get our juices flowing. They're exciting. We can make a difference. But if you approach San Antonio and you said, I want to retrofit you so everybody lives in modular homes, and everything's supplied by renewable systems, and we're going to get rid of all the infrastructure that you currently have, that is a task for the ages on that one. That is really challenging. However, I personally think it's exciting. I think that being able to take these large communities and really trying to figure out the pathway to do that, to give them all the benefits of new technology, all the benefits of competition, and really still let them keep the nice things that they like. One of the most interesting developments in San Antonio is a place called the Pearl. Anybody ever heard about the Pearl? Have you been? It's a beautiful place. It is a retrofit of an old brewery. There are certain things of charms of life that people love about the historical nature of what we have. And right now it's like one of the top hotels in the world in San Antonio. So that retrofit, that ability to be able to balance history and newness and freshness and exciting and collaboration is the thing that I think all utilities have to evolve to, and we're trying to embrace. But I'm trying to find 1,000 analogies for my customers, but oftentimes when you're a utility, what it feels like is you decided as a person you're going to buy a house, and you've invested all your money in a house, and we all know that we believe that when we buy a house, the big ability is to resell it, right? If you need to go somewhere, your ability to resell that house, you can buy a house somewhere else, is really good. But what if nobody wants to buy your house, right? And you're stuck with blank mortgage, and you're stuck with nobody doing that, and now you have an idle house that you have to pay for while you transition to a new, better house in a new market where your new job is. That is kind of how it feels to be an energy operator, that you've got this wonderful house that you've given to the community, and they go, I don't like it, not so much, right? I want something new. That said, customers are always right, so we got to figure it out. So just a couple of, I'll try to move faster here, but so the other thing I find fascinating, so we are very diversified. So we have nuclear, we have coal. We did decide 4 years ago to close some older coal plants, at a time when people told us we were crazy. They were kind of young for coal plants. They were like 30 years old, and everybody goes, why wouldn't you just put the environmental controls on those plants and keep them open? But we thought about it, and we said we could spend $500,000 on environmental improvements, or we could just go buy a new gas plant and reduce our emissions immediately and move forward. So we're still on track with that. So we have that, and we have 1,000 megawatts of wind. We have 7,000 megawatts of total capacity. About 1,000 of it is wind, about 500 plus is solar and growing. And we got a wide spectrum of solar. We got utility scale out the kazoo, but we've got rebates, we've got rooftop, and we've got community. So we believe that distributed generation and renewables is helpful. And I saw, where's the young lady that, presentation 10, where are you? Is she here? Presentation 10, okay, so that's what I'd say. Presentation 10 was awesome, because it's about how to really predict when your renewables will show up and not just follow the curve of when renewables are available. But as an operator, the fact of the matter is, when the power goes out, my community does not care whether wind has died in West Texas or that it's cloud cover and stormy. They want to be able to have conferences, so I have to have extreme reliability. And that's my mantra. If you're brand new to renewables and you want to get and sell it, that's great. But if you're already providing reliable service, it's a challenge and an opportunity. So when I look at it, I don't say renewables is the way to the future. I look at it as I always need to figure out what the firming capacity needs to be to couple with renewables. Today, it's my fossil units. Today, the moment when the wind dies down, my coal unit fires up. Or and you don't modulate nuclear, we all know that. You don't say, well, I'm just gonna turn the dial down on that one. So, and you're actually almost throwing away power that you're generating because you can't always make it perfect. But that's okay, we have learned and know how to do that. But the point is, the fossil fuel generation in our portfolio has actually been the pathway. We talked about bridging, solutions, whether gas is a bridging solution to distributed generation for us. But you need it. We needed it to create the leverage. And people thought we were crazy. When we first asked for a solar bid, we got 40 cents a kilowatt hour, a kilowatt. And we were like, why would we do that? We're below 10 cents, right? But the industry has changed, right? And now it's so important. It's like, I would say it's almost free, but it's not reliable enough. So I have to have my thermal units to firm up that capacity. But I still believe, what I believe is energy storage is the key to firming up the other side of my renewable capacity. And that's gonna get better. We're doing microgrids now, we're working with the military. The interesting thing about the military is I'm so excited. I'm like, golly, they have great applications. It's trying to solve our issues in terms of resiliency and their continued missions. But it's hard for them to let a private company into their infrastructure to provide resiliency. So I get to secure their library, and I'm still trying to build confidence so they'll let me actually do something really meaningful. But it's going to happen, right? We're going to couple renewables and we're going to couple it with energy storage. It's going to work, but we got to figure out the exact pathway, because every one of my stakeholders expects me to do it. So our company is one of the highest rated credit companies in the industries, IOUs and municipals. And there's many reasons for that. IOUs are always in a competitive market, so they already get handicapped. Our customers have paid for this investment, and because of that way of relationship in our community, we've been able to secure the right amount of financial support, and we get a lot of credit for that. But my credit rating agencies see all this change, and they're wondering, how am I gonna make that move? My owner, the city of San Antonio, we transfer about $350 million a year to help them with police and fire. They need me to solve that problem. And customers want it to be easy and almost free. So, but that said, again, I think every challenge is an opportunity to do something right. And they are my motivators. So I talk to them all the time to ask their input. So on our path, we have decided to lean into everything we can. We decided to remain diversified, to continue to invest in renewables, to look for new programs, and to create what we call our own new energy economy. So we are inviting countries from around the world to come to San Antonio, and particularly in the new energy space, new technologies, take root. It's one thing to provide service, it's something else to take root in a community, add jobs, invest in education, do scholarships, do programs like these. This is what we're looking for. So this is currently an ecosystem that we just created over the last 4 years and growing. And I believe in regionalism. We talked about that yesterday. I believe that regions can figure out solutions that work for them by working with policymakers. And I also believe that you can attract business by concentrating volumes amongst many, many customers in your service territory. And we are also locally inviting technology into our space. So somebody's going to say, did I like cheat and kind of EC3 versus the conference? I didn't know about this name, but what ours means. This year we launched a C3, which is Customercentric Competition. And we did it, and it was all open to the outside. In the next couple of months, we'll launch one that's just for employees. And so we're asking people to be creative. We're asking people to give us ideas, not apps, ideas, which again, the poster boards outside are amazing because they're real thoughts and they're real suggestions and they really think it through. And so we are looking for those type of solutions inside of our community so that we can get to a smarter community like everybody talks about. The grid is important, but for customers, they want to know what it's going to do for them. And so we talk very actively about this. So actually, I'm going to end with this. I also launched this year a Future of Energy Symposium essay. And one of my good friends who's a marketing entrepreneur, he's very successful in San Antonio, I had 4 hours of content, and he walked in and said, you can't possibly talk about energy for more than an hour. And I said, little surprise, we talk about these energy solutions all the time, and we talk about them because we want to make it transparent for you. I applaud this group here today. You are doing the good work. We are making a difference in the industry. It is amazing to see women this dang smart in a room thinking about the future. And at the end of the conference, Mo said to me, I was wrong. And we got to really continue to talk to people who are not in the industry to get them ready for what we need to do. And I am more and more enthused by being on that journey with you. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce Marcy Reid right now. She is the Chief of Business Operations at National Grid in Massachusetts. She's the only local one in the panel. We're happy to have you here.
It's good to be here.
She oversees the gas and electric business that brings energy to the lives of millions of residents and businesses across the state. She manages the relationships with the state regulators, government officials, and the communities that National Grid serves. Marcy joined National Grid in 1988 and has held various positions in finance, merger integration, and corporate affairs. She also spent 3 years in London as the head of the investor relations for National Grid. Marcy sits on the boards of Blue Cross Blue Shield Massachusetts, Northeastern University, the Massachusetts Business Roundtable, the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce, the Partnership, and the New England Council. She is the global executive sponsor for National Grid's Women in Networks Employee Resource Group. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Sila. Thanks very much, and thanks to the conference for having me. It's great to be here. And Paula, I too am an accountant, and so who knew? Who knew? It pissed off my father when I did it, but anyway, good morning. I will start, thank you for advancing the slide. I will start with just a little bit about National Grid. I know you're not all local. So we're one of the world's largest investor-owned utilities, serving more than 20 million people, not necessarily meters, excuse me. Been coughing all morning. And we employ around 26,000 people here in the US, in the northeast of the US and in the UK. We own and operate electricity distribution systems here in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and upstate New York. We also own thousands of miles of transmission in the area. And on the gas side, we serve gas distribution customers in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, upstate New York City, and Long Island. So we're busy at it. I'm here today to talk about a little bit. First, I'll set the challenge. And a lot of what I have set forth to talk about, I've heard a little bit from my colleagues up here. One of the points is that the U.S. in its total, the U.S. energy system needs around $2.5 trillion of, oh, aren't you lovely? And a cough drop, too. Thank you. About $2.5 trillion by 2035, much of it to replace aging infrastructure. And this is obviously according to the International Energy Agency. But doing so would allow us not only to address some of the issues we've already addressed today, but to drive economic growth and relieve the stress that we place on the environment. It's no surprise to all of us that a cleaner, more efficient, agile, and smart grid, with that we could reinvest around over $300 billion into our economy and create over 1 million jobs. That step would also help us reduce greenhouse gas emissions by about 4 billion metric tons, bringing us to about a third less than we had in 2005. And when I think about doing all that, as others have said, for us, customers drive our strategy. They are savvy, forward-looking, and deeply passionate about the environment. That's not the way it was in 1988 when I started in this industry. They also want choice in their energy space, much like the choice they have in everything else that they do in their daily lives. And they also want to make sure, and they want to feel like their energy delivery system is modern and responsive to their needs. So very much like you were saying, Paula. So we need to replace our existing infrastructure with more sophisticated assets that'll be smarter and more resilient. Most importantly, we need to understand our role as an investor-owned utility, as a regulated utility, in providing for low and middle class families. Customers in a regulated utility service territory don't actually get to pick who their energy delivery company is. It's just if they live in Cambridge, it is who it is. But we're ever conscious of our role in providing an essential service for all the families we serve. So really, above all, our customers' energy has to be affordable. We aspire at Grid to transition to a decarbonized energy network by 2050. We have a lot of work going on called 80 by 50, 80% greenhouse gas reductions by 2050. While at the same time, we want to help growing the local economy and ensuring that the long-term economic and environmental health of our communities. So that's the challenge. The opportunity, I think, really centers around partnerships. And the first is with our customers. We actually need to put them in charge. We don't even call them ratepayers anymore, although we did that for decades. It's horrible. They are customers, actually. And they will make the right choices if they have the right level of tools and information. We need more web-based big data solutions to increase the use of smart technology that'll help make choosing energy efficiency and productivity easier for all of our customers. So I'm an advocate of encouraging the manufacture and wider adoption of smart appliances that build in economical energy consumption right there in their home. And I will actually discuss our smart grid pilot in a moment. Also, giving customers options around their source of electricity, such as wind and solar, will help build a stronger market for renewable energy. So the second partnership is around technology partners. For decades, managers of electricity and gas networks have been generally reactive and risk-averse about innovation. It's how we were compensated, actually. That absolutely just needs to stop. We need to make our networks a technological playground for others, and we talk about that inside the walls of National Grid. We need to open up our networks to high-tech partners focused on efficiency, storage, and DG, such as solar, wind, and biogas. The third partnership that we need to pursue is around with our regulators and local governments. There are hundreds of investor-owned electric distribution companies in the states. There are another 900 owned by cooperatives or municipalities. And then there are another 1,600 local gas distribution companies around the US. we all answer to an array of state and local regulators. So while the system encourages a form of accountability, it doesn't make a priority out of aggressively investing in innovation and infrastructure. We think a better regulatory approach, Madam Regulator, might be to incent utilities to produce outcomes and meet desired public policy goals, such as efficiency, resiliency, and working with third-party tech partners, and at the same time penalizing failures. So let me quickly highlight 3 examples of how we are partnering with all of these key stakeholders at National Grid. I'll start first with our smart grid pilot, which is in, for us, Worcester, Massachusetts. Sherina spoke about Illinois and how it's much more widespread than we have here. Our pilot is admittedly much smaller, but the learnings are tremendous. The pilot is designed to provide customers the information they need through a package of smart meters, in-home technology, and new variable delivery rates. Customers in Worcester were given access to their usage information through in-home technologies that communicate directly with their meters, obviously in their house. In real time, and we've seen this, customers are now closely examining how and when they use the energy and at what cost. The program also enables us to communicate directly with them during critical periods when the demand on the grid is going to be quite high. And before these events, customers receive automatic alerts via however they choose, text, email, phone. And they can preset thermostats to save energy and money. They can also access load control devices that prevent water heaters and pool pumps and the like from operating during peak periods. Yes, in Massachusetts, we do have pool heaters. So the smart grid pilot also allows us to consider an enhanced portfolio of customer-owned generation opportunities. And future programs, such as the one which the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities should be ruling on in hopefully the first quarter of 2018, should include the adoption of smart home appliances through education. They should ease the impact of upfront investments and improve customers' understanding of how energy markets work. The second one I'll talk about, I didn't know it was going to do that, so sorry. The second one I'm going to talk about here is partnerships with technology partners. The North Country of upstate New York, if any of you have ever been there, is home to some of the nation's most severe storms. And as climate change continues to increase the frequency and intensity of storms, we must improve crisis preparedness and response. With trees down and power out, it's difficult, if not impossible, to move equipment into the area faster. We're seeing this still unbelievably in Puerto Rico. As many in this room know, many impacted areas rely on generator backup systems to provide partial power until proper resources arrive. To address this delay, we need to harden the electric grid to make sure that the power flows to the essential services like hospitals and first responders. None of this is news to you guys. So what we're doing about it is teaming up with Clarkson University, SUNY Potsdam, and the Village of Potsdam to create a microgrid that will localize a grouping of electric sources that normally connect to our traditional centralized grid. But the microgrid obviously will be able to disconnect and function autonomously like an island of energy during storms. In the event of an outage, the microgrid's underground system will separate from the utility's overhead system, becoming the islanded microgrid that'll deliver power to connected emergency service providers. This can work for up to 2 weeks after an extreme weather event, servicing not only the immediate area, but also enabling the town to act as a bit of a regional hub for restoration. The generation sources could supply 5 to 10 megawatts of power to the microgrid during the extreme events. And it's just another example of how we're actively teaming up with tech partners, and in this case, a university system, to implement innovative technologies. And then the last one that I'm going to address is how we need to be working with our regulators and communities proactively and challenging what it means to be a traditional utility. We see a future in performance-based rates, and we want to work with regulators to change the incentive structure, allowing us to improve performance and stretch forward toward our clean energy goals. The city of Buffalo, in this case, has a project that we think demonstrates our willingness to set the stage for a new era of service delivery. working with regulators on, in the New York REV, which someone mentioned earlier, we've built a community solar project that uses affordability as its main tenet. The goals of REV are a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, more generation from renewable energy sources, and a decrease in energy consumption. Here, we're working with partners to integrate and develop utility-owned solar, so we'll own it, in a low to moderate income community, which has been historically underserved by third-party market participants. They just don't think they want it, I guess. This project includes 100 solar installations to accelerate the adoption in the community, with the resulting savings redistributed equally among the larger group of neighborhood electric accounts as a bill credit. The project will also allow us to investigate the impact of the local solar generation on our grid efficiency. So unlike traditional solar installations, which generate electricity for one house or one business who can afford it, we'll aggregate the power from these 100 solar installations and share the benefits with residents who otherwise might not be in a position to install it on their own. I will end by saying that working with our customers, the technology partners, and the other key stakeholders, and by absolutely utilizing the cool ideas of all of the people in this room, we will absolutely help transform the energy industry and create the grid of the future that works for all of us. I know we will do it, and thanks for listening.
So I know we're a little over time in our presentations, but I have a few questions on the presentations themselves, so I'll be quick on asking these questions. Maybe I could just ask them, and while one is answering, you can think about, so that we can just sort of push through. So, Jaquelin, I'm really interested in finding out more about the research needs for institutional research needs for realizing the grid of the future. You've showed some trends, but is there a way to sort of prioritize and tackle them as the national laboratory community? That's for you. Sherina, I heard that you have asked, you talked about the smart grid deployments. That's really exciting, and that they're coming before their time. Are there, what kind of things are you thinking that the utilities are going to use these smart meter technologies for? Are targeting segmentation, customer segmentations, those kinds of things, targeting demand response programs, energy efficiency programs, are there, using the data, are there in the realm of the utilities? Are there discussions on how the data will be used? I have a question for you too, Paula. Right. I was wondering, you know, I'm really curious about the customers that you're listening to and how they see the grid of the future. You said there are some things that they want from you. What are those things? I'm really curious about that. And then, Marcy, I have so many things to ask you, but I'm really interested in the opening up of your networks and allowing innovators to come in and providing a playground. What are the timelines? How do you want to engage with the new partners? Just like.
Just building on that point, I really love that playground image and thinking about the grid in that kind of hosting style. And so when I think about the research needs, I think there is a lot of vision. I mean, the dynamic aspects of the future grid are really at the distribution edge. And what are all the ways that market opportunities and businesses and technologies are going to kind of create different ways of interacting with our energy needs. And so there's a vision there, and I don't think the vision is fully thought through on what there might be, but still, like, how you actually get there is like if you have a vision, how do you implement it? That's kind of the research direction that you know we're doing at the lab. Also, and this has come up on a few occasions, resiliency is another big area of our research. This is certainly the recent events have shown the importance of this, and then also the talk this morning spoke about the importance of resiliency. This is taken at our lab to be like a lab-wide team that's been assembled to sort of help focus, because it touches on so many different technology and data and policy and all the aspects that have to work together. And then I have to underscore the importance of data. So both as an opportunity and some of the current constraints that we have. So you had mentioned the high computing capabilities that we have now. There's been so much that we've been able to research with high computing technologies, and opportunities have really good data. So for example, a lot of our work that we've done has involved a lot of high quality weather data, just to be able to know more about the solar and wind. We need equally high quality demand data to be able to understand, not just what's the household profile look like, but what is the actual profile of demand within the home using all the different, technologies that you have, and understand that interaction with behavior. And there's so much data potential there. So like if we think about the future with driverless cars, there's a lot of data collection in those cars. What can we do with that data to harness it in the interaction with the grid? So that is, that's where I'm really hopeful of having more work.
Thank you.
I think that there are definitely, the smart meter deployment is probably one of the best things that has ever happened, I think, to this industry, because it does allow not only, the main thing I would say is for a reduction in frequency of interruption, which we've seen already in the last couple of years in piloted areas has significantly decreased. What those smart meters are doing is they're able to get a signal to the utility faster, almost before the consumer knows that there is an issue. Now, I know all of our utilities in Illinois, they have apps, and the ones that don't are working to get them. An app will tell me, I can look right now, maybe if I heard Al Roker say this morning there may be some storms in Chicago, I could check my app right now and it will tell me whether or not my power is on, and that is because of the smart meter. So that is a significant portion. More than anything, too, is the data that the utilities are receiving from these smart meters, and it's allowed them to put certain programs in place to work on cost reduction, such as the time of use program. You can now see when more of the consumers are using most of their electricity, when is peak time for them versus what does the utility believe the peak time is. So those things have been pretty significant in, again, addressing those changing needs of the consumer. Now, particularly with the millennial workforce, there's a lot of flexibility at work. No longer are you seeing houses totally desolate from 9 to 5. More and more people are working from home, and there's a lot more flexibility in the workplace. So you're seeing that. You're not necessarily seeing, a flat line from during those working hours. And the smart meter is also able to detect things like that and allow the utility to say, okay, let's pivot, right? Let's say we need a new program and figure out how we can best address this changing consumer.
So I get to talk about customers. I actually created a simple little graphic. I was going to show it to you, but describe it. It's just a heart, and it says, "Electrons love everyone." And in Texas, as you probably all know, we're a fairly conservative state. San Antonio is a progressive city and a conservative state. And I just tell you all that to say that I get, from a customer demand thing, I get all kinds of requests for things. But interestingly, it's not in terms of new products and services. I'm not telling people when we get Smart City, the energy that is produced by our organization, and then other services that can be attached to our new AMI system and the new metering system will respond to movement. Not just algorithms, but they'll respond to movement, and they'll respond to how you want to live. But that sounds like Star Trek to folks, and so they're not asking me this. Or, a lot of the argument I've got the, thermal fossil plants have served us well for a long time, and don't get rid of them. And on the far end of the spectrum, I got close that 10-year plant or 5-year plant tomorrow. And so that what they want is conversation, but not a whole lot of it. Eventually, people don't have that much appetite, but they want to be able to express themselves, and they want us to listen. So I talk to residential customers, can get to me. People stop me on the street. The business community wants me to make everything simple so they can grow faster. But that all of those inputs we are utilizing to try to figure out how to get to a common ground and really solve these problems in terms of making it work for them. And I do believe I've got to be at all end of the spectrum, and then help people kind of move to this new distributed generation perspective. So, and it won't happen unless I sit there and listen to every complaint, along with every suggestion, and the suggestions I hope will get a whole lot more fluid.
So the playground, what we talk about is we wrote a white paper a couple years ago called Connect 21, connecting our customers to the 21st century. We've since sort of written our next piece, which is called the democratization of energy. And in that, and in Connect 21, we talk about making our network a playground for others. What we actually believe our role should be is to provide the safe, resilient, reliable network for others to come and play, whether they're from a policy perspective, changing the rules and the regulations by which we play, or their technology partners. And so I look at this, which just stopped ringing. That was my 21-year-old son asking for money. Apple built this phone, but they don't put all the apps on it. You know, they are the playground for the apps. That's how we view us. We should be the network, and others should come and play on it. We recently changed the structure of our company to even more deliberately encourage this. So we have a big U.S. core business, core distribution business, transmission, and a big UK business. We took all of the spaghetti that was being thrown against the wall in innovation playgrounds, and we put them into one third group, which is called National Grid Ventures. It's less than a year old, and that is the place where we are doing everything with talking about stuff that already exists, such as residential solar, EV applications, DR, other DG, our partnership with Nest, the variety of things that are going on, but also encouraging partnerships with some of these tech partners that I talked about to just come in and try new things with us. We have 20 million people that we serve every day, just in the US, and another 11 million in the UK. We probably have some data and some interesting customer applications that they might find useful. So that's what we want to do.
That's great. I want to open up to questions from the audience. Oh, wow.
Hi, this is Libby Wayman with GE. Question particularly for Paula and Marcy about this ecosystem of innovation. We've been that theme has come up a couple times throughout the 2 days here. Can you talk about some of the challenges of maybe working with newer companies who bring a lot of innovative ideas, and how the broader ecosystem can bridge some of those challenges between newer companies, startups, and kind of the real life realities of operating safely and productively in this playground, in this grid?
I'll jump in a little bit. So we created a pathway for the organizations that are in an ecosystem. Most of them did it through initially bidding on our work, and so they knew that they had a way to start off in our community. But we put a significant amount of weight associated with making sure that it was just not an offer of just products and services, but it was, you need to make a longer term investment so that we can continue to create. And so the initial business was good, but it does have that flavor of a whole, startup. So even the most extreme example, we had a company came all the way from South Korea, and they had no business presence inside of the United States, but they looked at it as an ability to get to the Western part of the hemisphere, and at the very least to do a North American centralized location and be able to do business from there. And we actually invite them in and talk to them about how we think about the industry and where it's going. And then we bring at least once a year, we bring them all in together so they can start to feed off of each other about prospects in Mexico or Canada or somewhere in South America, Africa. It's getting to be an amazing thing, but it does require real relationships. It does require you to pay attention and recognize that a startup is a startup. And so there's typically a high likelihood of failure. to continue to create. What we learned, just real quick, what we learned really quickly is that we could consume the entire capacity of the organization, and we weren't giving them enough opportunity to go out and do new business. So it was almost like dropping off a cliff. When our project ended, as big as it was, they had not spent enough time looking for new business. So now we say we'll give them a longer ramp to do things. We'll say that we want to only eat up so much of your capacity. We'll modulate it based upon helping you survive, but encouraging you to go out and work that ability to grow your business. And then we will connect you to chambers, the San Antonio Economic Development Foundation, and all those things so that people can know who and what you are. And so that's kind of how we do it.
I will simply add that the challenge is probably on our side. People come and work at a utility for a long time, and the best employees we have are the brand new ones who come from somewhere else and bring really crazy, stupid ideas that are great. And so I agree with everything that Paula said, but the utility workforce has also got to continue to evolve and be accepting of everything that we need to do.
Oh.
One more question.
Hi, Sanam Rastegar with McClarty Associates. We talked a lot about how when modernizing the grid, that we look at flexibility, affordability, efficiency, but I'd love to know where security plays a role in your work and how much it's considered as you're thinking about modernizing the grid.
So I mentioned in my presentation that under our Next Grid initiative, which is our Utility of the Future grid modernization platform, that there are 8 working groups, and one of them is cybersecurity, and that has been significant because I do believe, we could have an entire 5-day conference on talking about cybersecurity. And one of the things that Sila mentioned kind of earlier was, kind of what is that thing that keeps you up at night? For me, it's cybersecurity, and it's the lack of security for the grid and how often it's actually penetrated, and not necessarily always successfully, but it still is. And so that has been, we have a separate working group literally just focusing on that and trying to determine what we need to have in place in order to ensure that the modernization of the grid, while at the same time is technologically advanced, it's also technologically secure.
The one thing I would say as a municipal, it blows my mind, but we actually get about 90,000 hits a day from people who are trying to penetrate our grid. I always say that to others who are in the industry of disruption, not this disruption, but in being able to control systems like a utility, I think we look like a big Rubik's Cube, and people spend all their time trying to do that. So we have elevated security. Security used to be all physical. Now it has to be what we call an integrated solution. We look at, I think one of the most scary attacks is someone who knows how to create a physical and a cyber attack simultaneously. And so we look at everything in terms of trying to solve those issues. And the only other quick thing I'll say is the funny thing about even like we have a relationship for 157 years, but our customers don't like us to play around with their data, and they don't want our us to just. They don't even like the fact that we're, monitoring and optimizing the data so much. And so sometimes people say, "Are you looking inside of my house?" And I almost start every public thing by saying, "We're not looking inside of your house. We're looking at data." And so we have to protect it extra special in terms of what customers require us to do. So as a municipal, we take it really seriously. But this is what we do. We're not, because we own the customer relationship, we're not just providing infrastructure. We have an extra pressure on us. So we ask for opt-in options. If a customer wants us to let them do something with their data and work with another company on their behalf to give them better solutions, we will gladly do that. But we do not let people we don't subscribe our data out and let everybody do everything because of the dangers associated with attacks and using, using people's data inappropriately.
We have to stop our panel because we're out of time, but our panelists are here. They will be happy to answer your questions. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much.